have that file on your local machine, and then you can install it from there as well. So I've just downloaded it earlier. I'm going to say choose file, and I am going to select my TGZ, say upload. So, and now of course it's going to ask me if you want to restart. You're going to want to restart Splunk so that it, it clears everything out. Let's see here. This will take just one moment. This is a good spot for me to take a little step.
So when we are trying to install an add-ons, so do we have any restrictions with respect to the current version of the Splunk we are using in the add-ons that we have?
Yes, that's a great question. That's a great question. So when you are looking at Splunkbase, so one of the things that's important is this Splunk version, okay? So if you want to filter down to add-ons and apps that have been certified and vetted with your current version of your installation, that's where you would come here and select the version that you have, and then look at what's available. The other option as well is sometimes this can be the catalyst for actually getting upgraded within an environment. There might be some incredible new free apps that would have significant impact and value to your organization available, but you can't do it until the infrastructure gets upgraded. So, so they kind of go hand in hand, but you can absolutely check here to see on an app by app or TA basis what's supported for your version of Splunk. Now, and I will tell you, I'm not sure if I'm really supposed to say this, there is a little bit of wiggle room. This is like certified or tested or verified by Splunk, but sometimes, people will look at something and say, hey, it hasn't been vetted, but they open it up and they kind of look at what's in there and they go, it's a new release of Splunk, it hasn't been gotten to yet, I think it's gonna work, and you might wanna try that out on a separate environment, not in production, but essentially this is what we are blessing. You are more than welcome to try it outside of that on your own. It just means we haven't certified it officially yet. Okay, so I have gone ahead and rebooted here. Got my super secret username and password on my sample instance. Okay. So now let's go back. So I have this add-on installed. So now I'm going to say add data, and I'm going to do an upload. And now let's see how this looks a little bit different. Hold on just one second.
Is the number of fields restricted?
I'm sorry?
The number of the fields. When you upload the data,
I have, to my knowledge, there is no practical limit. I have not met any limit on any number of fields. I mean, we have people, it's JSON, it's XML, they've got like massive event structures. So I have not seen any limit, but if you have the specific data source in mind that's an area of concern, we can talk more detail about that. Other questions? A second. Okay. So now this looks a little bit different because what we have here, we have our Palo Alto default. I'm going to ignore this one here because this is not relevant for our conversation today. But the data source that you're going to be using is pan::log. So this is the data source that has been given to us by the TA. So if you identify a source type as pan::log, then there's a whole lot of goodness and cool things that are going to come out of it and some sort of fancy stuff, which I love. So I'm going to say it's a pan::log, and I'm going to say next. And I'm going to leave all of these other options still the same. Say review, submit, and start searching. Now, one of the things you'll notice if you do this is what happened to my data. I thought I just ingested pan::log data, and it's going to take the source type that I ingested as my default source type that it's searching by. But one of the cool things about the pan data, the people who built this, they know pan data upside down and backwards. So what they have done is when you're ingesting pan data, there's actually a whole lot of different event types that are in that data. And so what it does is as the pan data comes in, the TA is configured to automatically recognize the pattern of the event and resource type that data to one of 5 options, so that each event that's an endpoint event or a system event or traffic or threat is source typed as a unique source type appropriately, so that you get all of the fields for that unique source type appropriately, which is pretty amazing. So that's the first indication. So you pull it in as pan::log. Don't be surprised if you can't find pan::log, because everything should have been converted to the new, appropriate source type for each one of those underlying unique event structures. And then the other sort of check is we now have all of our fields. So we went from not really having anything for our fields that were extracted with the default to now I can see action, I've got known vulnerabilities, I've got excessive bandwidth, subcategories, all of this rich information in here. So flags, file names, future uses. So one of the things I just in the demo world, when something doesn't work correctly, when I ingested the first file, what I expected to see, and I think I just possibly grabbed the wrong file, was that normally with pan data, if you don't use the TA, you'll see that that line count number is higher. And so instead of it being 1 like it is right now, it should have been that there were 2 or 3 different formats, because in the pan data, some of those sources actually have a slightly different structure to the time and date stamp. And getting the time and date stamp in Splunk is super critical. So if you don't get it right, it's going to sort of munge some of your events together. So you always want to check that line count field and make sure that if it's single line, it's really coming in as only single line. If you've got 2 or 3 different patterns there within the line count, then you're going to want to look at that. And that's probably some broken data that you would want to tweak within your configurations. Okay, so now, quick question.
Is Splunk always about the date and time, or like, for example, you get to survey data with comments and stuff like that, or is it
Yes.
mostly about timestamps and
That's a good question. That's a good question. So, because of how we got our start and because of how we built Splunk from an efficiency standpoint, yes, it is always 100% of the time about the date and the time, because we key off of the time, meaning we put that data in a place in time to retrieve it. So when we search by time, and it enables us to be very efficient, because the data is stored in files that we call buckets on the back end that have a bound by a time and date, an epoch time and date stamp on the file. So if you search for something from last week, I can look at just the file names of the buckets, and based on the name of the file name, I can tell that there are no events in there that are within that range, okay? And that enables me to be incredibly scalable, because I can have petabytes and petabytes of data, and I can search for something, and I don't have to search everything. I can go to just the buckets of data that I know have some events that might meet the search criteria, and then do the more advanced things. If your data doesn't have a time and date stamp, that's okay. We're simply going to apply the ingest time, the index time, as the time and date stamp. So everything will get a time and date stamp, but the time and date stamp will be when it was ingested. So, and there are other times where you might have certain types of data that really are reference data that you might want to load as a lookup, that sort of thing as well. So those have an associated time and date to them, associated to when they were ingested as a lookup. But so yes, everything gets a time and date stamp, and we care about the event break for everything. Those are your golden tickets, if you will. Next question.
So given that Splunk is a time series-based log, is it expected that all the data that is coming in needs to be UTC format, or like how does it handle time zones?
That's a great question. So on your events, so Splunk is going to convert. Oh, we don't want that. Okay, Splunk is going to convert everything into epoch time or universal machine time. Okay, but how did it get there? So there's 2 options. One is there's something on your event in your time and date stamp that has the time zone offset. So Splunk will usually automatically recognize that and convert that. So in the data previewer, when you're looking at that and you have a time and date stamp and it has, offset as 7 hours, then what you see for Splunk, we should do it this way. What you see for Splunk on the left as Splunk's time, and what you saw in the event should be off by that number of hours. If you know you're pulling something from Texas or from EMEA, and you know what the number of calculation hours is offset for epoch, we're always going to be in epoch or universal machine time, because it flattens out everything and enables you to do time correlations across various devices and time zones. If you don't have the time and date stamp or the offset in your time and date stamp, Splunk provides a parameter, a TZ, is it TZC or TZ? It's a TZ parameter. So when I'm ingesting the next data source, I can just come back here. If we look at adding data, upload, select, I'm not going to do it, so I'll just pick another one here. So there's auto, there's current time, and there's advanced. And so I can do things, we're going to talk more about best practices, but using the TZ parameter will enable you to define that offset if it wasn't automatically picked up for the event structure. And it is really important to get that right, because if you're going to start correlating across sources, you want to make sure, if I'm going to look at something that happened and I'm going to trace an event, and this device is in a 2-hour different sort of clock, then you want to make sure those all got sort of normalized to epoch time.
Just a follow-up to that. So let's say if I'm feeding all my data in UTC time format, in the UI, does it provide an option saying that, okay, I'm doing it from Pacific time zone, I want to see all the...
Yes, and that's more on the end user side. Yes, so there are end user preferences within your user profile to then say, yeah, this is an epoch, but what time does it mean for me as a user? So the most important thing, and we're focusing today on that onboarding piece, but 100%, because not everybody thinks in epoch time. You want it to make sense for their lunchtime, their middle of the night, their busy business hours, their Friday, their Saturday, okay? So that's more of an end user preference setting that they can set individually within the UI. Next question. This is great, by the way. I love the questions as we're going along, because that means you're not allowed to have any at the end. No, I'm just kidding.
In regards to bringing in data, like one of the things we do is we generate logs into a file that generates a new log file every month. So if I scan that file on a daily basis, does it duplicate the previous, like if I look at that file every day, does it duplicate the previous stuff, or?
That's a really good question. So I feel like you guys have like set me up. Like I feel like I took some Splunkers and I put you guys out in the audience to like so I could knock it out of the park. Okay, that's a great question, and that's actually one of the things I'm going to be covering next. So hold that, because absolutely understanding how that works and how that's efficient makes a significant difference in the environment. So let's move on to that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say add data again, and as I add data, instead of just uploading a file, I'm going to use the forwarder capability. So I'm not going to forward it out to somewhere else. I'm going to bring it into myself. Because it's a full instance, I've got the forwarding capability built in. So I'm going to go ahead and say monitor. So this now gives us some different options in terms of how we want to ingest data. So the first two, files and directories,